6 years ago, during the Great Storm, Detective Bullock and his partner were investigating a drug called ICARUS. Bullock was able to put the drug out of circulation at the cost of his partner's life. Gotham's been clean of it ever since. So imagine his surprise when he sees it resurface on the doorsteps of Mr. Wayne. At Wayne Manor, Detective Bullock heatedly interrogates Bruce. He demands to know where he got the ICARUS drug from, assuming Bruce bought it to use it at the party he was having here. He believes he gave it to Ellen Aguila, who overdosed and died right here on Wayne's doorstep. But Wayne insists that the woman just showed up out of nowhere before she passed away. Bullock has a hard time believing this. She has no car here, she had no jacket, no purse, instead insisting she was right here with Bruce the entire time. Bullock demands Wayne surrender a urine sample. Technically, he needs a warrant, but Bruce is willing to cooperate, insisting he is innocent. Bullock asks Wayne not to leave town until he clears all this up. Looking into this, Alfred is able to determine Elena had no past indicating she suffered from addiction. Batman travels out into Gotham city limits and discovers a crime scene where Elena was taken from a car, pinned to the ground, injected with a drug, before she was able to run to Wayne Manor where she had tragically passed away from the overdose. This was a murder. And Batman vows to get to the bottom of it before Detective Bullock, who has made this personal, does something stupid. He poses as a criminal and attempts to seek out ICARUS for himself, only for a gang to shoot him in the streets. Batman was prepared for this eventuality, however, wearing a bulletproof vest and planting a tracker on the car from which the gangsters shot him. At Elena's funeral, Bullock mentions to Wayne that the lab cleared Bruce of any drugs in his system. His superiors want him to shift the focus on the investigation to others, but Bullock disagrees. Bruce offers Bullock a piece of advice to let go of his emotions and instincts and to follow the evidence. That night, despite Alfred's qualms that a vest can only stop so much of a shotgun blast, Batman sets out to follow the tracking device. It was all worth it if he can find this gang, a gang that's so violent they're willing to shoot a man dead in the streets. He traces the signal to a number of cargo containers being held on a vessel. When he opens one of them up, he's shocked to discover a number of children being held prisoner here. When Alfred asks if everything is alright, Bruce replies no, and that he's signing off. When he opens the last container, however, he is pulled inside, and the door slams shut. There is a man inside waiting for him, with the ICARUS logo tattooed on his chest. His name is Sumo. He thought bats could see in the dark. The container is pulled up in the air by a crane while Sumo begins viciously attacking the Dark Knight, mocking him for just being a little thing when he's supposed to be the scary masked avenger. An already injured Batman struggles against this foe, who tackles him out of the container, and they both fall out into the wide open air. Batman is able to take control of the fall and slams the Sumo into another container on the ground, badly injuring the man and shattering a few of his vertebrae. Threatening the Sumo with the possibility that the villain may never walk again, he demands to know who paid the criminal to kill Elena. The Sumo manages to choke out an answer, the squid, before the Dark Knight calls for help and takes off. Quietly, he is watched by two men, who order a truck containing a strange device to get out of here before anyone sees them. They look at each other and know what must be done. They need to take care of him before everything blows up in their faces. Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and this is my recap and review of Detective Comics number 31. So, turns out I got a little busy near the end of the holiday season there, and thus we're a little bit late relative to when I wanted to have the 12 days of Detective Comics finished as a series, but whatever, who cares. We're at the final episode, and that's kind of a fun and interesting way to close things out by taking a look at the new 52. And I have to tell you, it was interesting. I didn't really know what to expect because the way I remember Detective Comics as it existed during the New 52, I remember this is kind of perception more than reality, or at least just how I'm remembering something, especially as it existed now almost several years ago. So take this all with a grain of salt. But I always thought of it as Batman was the Scott Snyder top shelf stuff, where the Batman series was all about the Dark Knight being the Dark Knight, facing off against the Joker, the Court of the Owls, characters like that, Zero Year, those sort of stories. Detective Comics was more focused on a mystery aspect and angle of stories about Batman actually solving mysteries and being a detective more than a superhero. That's kind of the point we had reached with the New 52 and Detective Comics as a series. We've rebooted numbers, as we had with every series running at this time, and there's something a little sad about that, or even perhaps arrogant. This series had been running for so long, and now more than ever I appreciate the history ingrained in it, and it's a little sad seeing that they basically abandoned that for a time, but not to the extent that it abandons things entirely. It's very easy to incorporate the New 52 into the issue count of this series, and isn't really that difficult now that they've resumed numbering with Rebirth. Part of the reason why I was couching my perceptions of Detective Comics during the New 52 as a series in my memories as being kind of wrong is because I didn't read the series a lot. And when I did, it was usually for tie-ins to other bigger events, be it larger DC stuff or Batman-related events and storylines. That definitely didn't help matters, because Detective Comics often came across as pretty disappointing and lackluster in comparison to the Batman series that I was really enthralled by at the time. And that being said, let's not couch this issue too much in the overall picture of Detective Comics. Looking up reviews of this at the time, it's pretty clear that this comic, with a new creative team behind it relative to who was running the show with the New 52 earlier in the series, is Francis Manapul and Brian Buccellato, and they both do a great job here, but this isn't the norm for the series. So this series, and how I remember it, is more accurate than, let's not pretend that there weren't problems with New 52's Detective Comics. It wasn't always as great as this issue is, because this issue is awesome. Buccellato and Manapul work together in telling a story here in a really cool way. Francis Manapul is a name that if you've been following this channel for a while you've heard before, or if you know comic books you've definitely heard before, because he's a pretty big name artist. This is one of the first stories I've read where he's actually has a huge role in the actual storytelling of everything though, and I love it. I think if we didn't have Buccellato to kind of help even out the story, it would be one of those typical artist-driven comic books. But as it stands, I think Buccellato basically created the overall outline and basic premise of the story, and then Manapul basically transformed it and used it and maybe even tweaked it and altered it a little bit in order to best facilitate a story told in a visual medium. I talked a bit about how great that was in issue 803 in our last review in this mini-series. Here it feels even more relevant. The art feels even more dynamic and being used to facilitate the storytelling in a very positive way that one would hope a comic book would take advantage of, but often they don't. That's why I've been kind of surprised that I'm seeing this recurringly in the Detective Comics series in some of these older to more recent comics that we're reviewing at the tail end of this series. It's great, it's really awesome, and just a little unexpected from series that I'm picking out issues at random from, but that's positive. It means that overall this has been happening a lot in these more recent years, which I would argue, in spite of some issues I have with the New 52, Detective Comics did. They were more experimental and trying different things, and that is very cool. I definitely think that's a smart thing to do with this series going forward now that Batman, the series, is the top seller of DC Comics at this point in their history and is the main thrust of Batman's storytelling. that's no longer Detective Comics. We are well past that point now. So I've been enjoying that on the whole, and I have to say this is a pretty fun issue I would recommend. I love how Detective Bullock, a character that we first saw in the 1980s issue we reviewed, really has a part in here and feels like a firm character. Yeah, he's a bit of a jerk as always, and he's not exactly behaving in the most sympathetic way right now, but you can understand why. He's emotionally involved in these events. Bruce Wayne challenges him not to be and tries to push him in the right direction, but you can tell that Bullock just doesn't feel that way and isn't working that way right now, and I understand that. It's not done in a way that makes his character come across as obnoxious. With Manapul's art and excellent lettering by Jared K. Fletcher, I really like this comic book. We're part 2 in a story, once again just kind of diving into the middle of a story arc like we did last time around, and to be honest, it works just as well. It's really interesting and tells a very fun story in a positive way. I will say before we go, as I look across the 12 issues we reviewed and the content we've covered so far, I really enjoyed most of the series. There aren't any true weak links, the closest to that being issue number 548, the 1980s comic we reviewed that took place pre-Crisis and clearly didn't know what to do with Jason Todd or even the Batman character in some ways. Some people have pointed out some good things about it. It seemed to be a bridge between 2 story arcs and therefore a lackluster issue in that regard, and I would agree, it just wasn't up to snuff compared to everything else we did. But I gotta tell you, out of everything reviewed, I think this new 52 issue might be my favorite. The way it uses its artwork so effectively to tell a story, such as how Batman travels through a forest, putting together a crime scene again, that not only makes for good detective work and that sort of thing, and really feels like Batman's actively solving a mystery here, but actively makes this comic look more interesting than anything we've reviewed so far in this mini-series. But I also love, and think it actually might be my favorite, the annual that we reviewed from the 1990s, written by Chuck Dixon. It's a Chuck Dixon comic. It's hard not to love it, and the dynamic action behind it, as well as the dark and interesting tone that it takes. I also really love the Gardner Fox comics, which really stood out to me. And he's a real classic writer who you can tell shaped a lot of what we like about DC canon today. That was cool to see in action. And I learned a little bit of something from those issues. The Golden Age and other Silver Age comics we reviewed were also great, and they kind of exist somewhere in between the 1980s comics and the Gardner Fox comics that I really enjoyed, as well as 803. That roughly fills out the 12 and should give you a sort of idea of where I stand on everything. Really liking some of the more modern comics that use our more modern sense of art and storytelling to really inform an interesting comic in a way that we hadn't seen in Detective Comics up until then. But the older comics have a lot of nostalgia to them, but also this pioneering aspect to them I quite enjoyed. The earliest stuff really shaped Batman and Robin in cool ways, so let's not overlook it or downplay how important or fun they were. That Bronze and Silver Age stuff where we get into the more blue-looking Batman with the long flowing cape and stylistic content, that's really great, and I have a lot of love for it too. Don't let my strong opinion of some of the modern comics we happen to review downplay how much I enjoyed us getting into Batgirl and that sort of thing as well. And that's about it for this series. I'm running out of battery power and time as the last little bit of my holiday season is rapidly crunching in on itself. So I'm gonna be seeing you guys on the other side of Christmas at this point. That'll be when you all are watching this video because I don't have time to edit it and all that business. But that's the holidays for you. It's a busy time of year and we all have to do what we gotta do. So thanks for watching. Be sure to check out our Patreon page in the video description below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep reading comics.